All right, good morning, good morning. We're going to get started here. How's everybody doing this morning? Good. You guys get sick of when people ask you that and then you don't really respond the first time and then they're like, wow, you guys must not be doing really well. And then they make you say it again really loud. Do you guys get sick of that? I get sick of that. All right, my name is Malachi, and this is Ted here. We're going to be talking about what does you do you actually mean? What is the underlying value that's there, and how does that relate to our Christian lives and ministry? But before we do that, I want to ask a couple questions to get to know you guys and to get to know us, because we have this formatted a little bit like a conversation. We want to inspire a real environment, one where we get to actually talk about who we are, and what does our walk with Jesus look like, and how does that apply to this. And so we'd like to get honest and build some trust there. So I know it's Saturday, and I went to Momentum growing up, so this is like the day where everybody's falling asleep, especially during power treks. It's like nap time. But yesterday we had a guy that was sitting right here. It was so funny. He put on his sunglasses and his hat down like this, and I knew he was just sleeping the whole time, but he had sunglasses on, so apparently that's a good way to hide it. So if anybody has sunglasses on, I'm going to know what you're doing, obviously, like everybody else would. So how many of you got less than 4 hours of sleep last night? Raise your hand. Less than 4? That's horrible. What are you doing? Okay, less than 6. Okay, that's better. How many of you are actual responsible people and you got less than 8? Well, eight or so. There you go. Most of the adults raise their hands.
So I think that was actually a logic question, because if you add less than 4, you actually had less than 8 as well. So.
We're in ministry. We don't do a whole lot of logic. All right. Well, I'd like to open in prayer, and then we'll get going here a little bit more. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this time. We just thank you for your presence this morning, Lord, and your mercies that are truly new every single morning. Lord, mercies that we cling to and we throw ourselves upon, Lord, and just grateful for this week and for this opportunity. God, may we really enjoy this last day that we have with our friends, and with the sessions and with the activities that we have to do. But Lord, ultimately, would you be glorified? Or would you allow us to speak well, Ted and I, and for our listeners here to listen well, Lord, and to gain what you have to teach them today. We ask these things in the name of Jesus. Amen.
So Malachi, you've given them your name, but you haven't said anything about yourself.
Okay. I am Malachi. I'm 21 years old. I work for Encompass World Partners. Raise your hand if you've ever heard the name Encompass World Partners. Yeah, there we go. There's like 8 people that have, which is great. How many of you have heard of Charis Fellowship? Raise your hands. All right, that's a little better, I guess. It's kind of the same people. Okay, how many of you have heard of Grace Brethren? Where do you people go to church? Illinois. Oh, that's even more boring than Indiana. No offense. I'm born in Indiana, so I can make jokes about it. I go to school at Lancaster Bible College in Pennsylvania. She's got an LBC shirt on there. And I'm studying intercultural studies with a focus in business as mission. I've been working with Encompass for about 6 months now, and Encompass is the international sending arm of the Charis Fellowship, Grace Brethren churches. So we help people from those churches, from your churches, get onto the mission field. And who are you, Ted?
All right. Yeah, my name is Ted. I'm slightly older than 21. More slightly. So I'm the director of church planting for Encompass World Partners. So I actually oversee our church planting efforts globally. And so that's my job. Actually, the biggest claim to fame I have is that I'm married to Kaylinn. Back there, raise your hand. So, and yeah, that's, I don't know why she, yeah, give her a hand. Yeah. That's more applause than I've ever received personally. So yeah, we are here, and we're going to talk about you do you. And so we're trying to think the theme of the conference. We had some information given to us beforehand, and so we're thinking, what can Encompass bring to the table? So this might go a little bit different direction than you think it would coming into the talk, but we want to talk about this idea of you do you, what underlies it, and then how it affects how we relate to other people, and then ultimately how it reflects how we relate to the world and what that might mean. So that's kind of the flow of what we're going to be doing this morning. Hopefully that's the flow. We'll find out what happens. But we're glad you're here. I am super impressed. I have been actually surprised by how nice you guys are. I don't know why, maybe because I had my own kids, but but everybody's been super polite. So you guys should give yourself a hand. You know, I don't know. Maybe when you leave these conferences, you go back to the rabid animals that you might actually be. I don't know, but so far it's been a wonderful experience for myself, at least, to interact with you. So we're going to show a video and that we had put together with a texting thing about you do you. All right, now you've seen the video, we're done. You have any questions? So obviously you see this progression that happens with this idea of you do you going on, and very encouraged. So I just did a quick lookup of how would you define you do you, and so this is what found here. So I found a lot of definitions, but this one's pretty simple. So when someone says you do you, they're expressing their feeling that you are allowed to do whatever you want. While they may not have the same interests or agree with your approach or values, they will say you do you. And so you can there's some examples in that little text interchange, right? But I'll give you a couple examples. Super simple ones, very innocuous, that would fit a good example of you do you. So, hey, you guys are all going to get pizza? I don't want pizza, man. I'm gonna go get Chick-fil-A. Response, that's cool, you do you, fine. I would always choose pizza over Chick-fil-A, by the way. Hey, I've decided not to go out for baseball. I want to play soccer instead. Hey, bro, you should do what you want. I mean, those are super simple things, right? But the idea of you do what makes you happy, I'm going to do what makes me happy, and it's all cool. So if you think about you do you, there are actually some pretty good things to it. We actually, just so you know, we didn't really know how yesterday's seminar went. We thought it was okay, but we thought maybe it could be better. So we thought, let's just look at GPT, and maybe that'll give a better seminar. And so I actually did look it up and have some stuff maybe later might come out. But they actually had these, Chat GPT actually had these as some of the good reasons for the positives of you do you. And so one of them is being authentic. You know, that it allows you to be yourself. And I think, you know, authentic, big word. I like the idea of you not being fake. You know, because being fake is, I don't find it attractive, and I don't want to be that way. But a lot of times there's a pressure to be, you know, conform and be fake. So that's a good thing. Recognition of diversity, that we're actually all different from each other. And if you come from a Christian perspective, that difference is made by God in us, and we can celebrate the fact that we're different in many different ways. And then another one is encourages life according to strengths and personalities. So again, it's that self-expression. So there's some really positive things that come out of this idea of you do you. We're a little risky because we know it's the last day. Everybody's tired, and you don't know us very well. Any other thoughts on what a good example of, or some good things about the idea of you do you that you might have? You got crickets again. Come on, don't be shy. Well, I could turn to Chat GPT if I'm not going to get it. Not yet. So anyhow, yeah, I mean, so there's some good things, but there's also some not so great things about you do you, and we're going to kind of talk about underlying things as well for that, but Yeah, so I think the one of those underlying realities is, and yeah, I know you guys have heard this. You might have even said it. I hope, but hey, bro, that's your truth is your truth. My truth is my truth, and that's okay, right? So, but that can be problematic. So I'm just kind of wondering what I'm going to turn over to Malachi because he has really good thoughts on this.
Yeah, I think you to you is something that we hear a little bit more. It's kind of something I know I say a lot. I just say, "Do your thing, bro." Like something that I say a lot. But under this is something that's really important to me as I think about the worldview that we are growing up in this generation. This "your truth is your truth and my truth is my truth" kind of philosophy, and it's not really a new thing. How many of you guys have heard that "your truth is your truth, my truth is my truth" kind of thing? Yeah, something that we hear, and I think even more so, it's way more pervasive than just that phrase, right? It's a philosophy and a concept that we believe in our culture very heavily. It stems from even 1,000 years ago in existentialism with the philosophers, and this idea basically that truth doesn't exist. There's no absolute truth. And so if that's true, then whatever you believe is true for you, and whatever I believe is true for me. If there's no general principle of truth, then we should be allowed to believe whatever we want, and we should be able to call that actual truth in our lives. Now, this is obviously a problem for us as Christians, right? This is not what Jesus proclaims. This is not, Jesus does not say, do your thing, bro. Believe whatever you want to believe, and you'll end up in heaven. But I think it's a really important topic that underlies this idea of you do you.
Yeah. So as Malachi said, it's really this idea of of your truth is your truth, my truth is my truth is really not what the Bible says, actually, and not what our life should be founded on. So we're going to look at two passages from Scripture, and we're not going to exegete them and go into them in detail, but they are, I think they're helpful to get some baseline thinking for what we're talking about. So let me pull these up here, or just go to them. So the first is from Colossians. So he is the image of the invisible God, he being Jesus, the firstborn of all creation. For by him all things were created, in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or rulers or authorities, all things were created through him and for him. And he is before all things, and in him all things hold together. He is the head of the body, the church. He is the beginning, the firstborn from the dead, that in everything he might be preeminent. For in him all the fullness of God was pleased to dwell, and through him to reconcile to himself all things, whether on earth or in heaven, making peace by the blood of his cross. So one thought from that is, if he's the one who created all things, are created through him and for him, then that's the kind of that's the marker. What is true? It has to be something that's according to his creating and created for him, and that's really key. And then the second verse, again, not going deep into these, but this one is like, that has a lot into it, right? That passage we just read, there's a lot we could do, like whole sermon series on that. But here's a much simpler one that helps us. And Jesus said to him, I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. So this thought of multiple truths is very problematic if you listen to Jesus' words. So I'm very curious as to what you have to say about that, Malachi.
Yeah, I think this is something that so many people in our world believe, not just necessarily in our culture. Almost every religion at some level believes this kind of idea, right? If my truth is right, it's what I believe, and I'm going to make my own truth and live that out. But specifically, I think it's really important when it comes to atheism and that kind of idea, right? There is no God, there is no truth. So whatever I believe is what's right for me, and that's how I'm going to live. But Jesus says no. Jesus says no. I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. So it's really important as Christians to stand on this truth and to know this to be the only truth. Jesus in Christianity is the only way. into heaven and into an eternity and salvation now and forever. But that's all the theological and the logical kind of stuff. How does this actually play out? What does this mean for us to live day by day? What do you think, Ted?
Well, one thing about that. So we could, we're here in a probably predominantly Christian audience. I'm assuming some of you guys aren't yet. That's always going to be true in a crowd. But this sounds pretty harsh, right? So what we're actually saying is, you do you. Your truth is your truth. My truth is my truth. Has massive limitations, right? And I am saying that actually, what you are saying is true is not true. It doesn't matter whether you think it's true for yourself or not. It's actually just simply not true. And so that sounds really harsh, right? I mean, doesn't that seem rather intolerant, right? To tell somebody that you're wrong? It sounds pretty intolerant to me. And it definitely is a hard thing to live. And I think that's where the foundation of where we're going to get this from is so crucial, right? Because if my truth is my truth, your truth is your truth, and it's coming from basically it's going to be just coming from your own experiences and emotions, right? Whatever your past is, whatever you've experienced, whatever stuff you fed into your brain, that's going to determine what you think. But it actually has huge problems if it's actually not true, right? The fact that your truth is your truth, my truth is my truth, that is a incomprehensible. It just can't be true. Now, if I'm talking about what I like to eat, and what you say what you like to eat, we can both have different truths when it comes to that, because that's a very subjective thing. But when it comes to about what reality actually is, what is truly true, that just doesn't work. So I think so I have an example from when I was a bit younger. I was on staff with Crew, and I was doing a symposium at a University of Southern California, and I was representing evangelical Christians. Evangelical is kind of a bad word nowadays. Wasn't back then. And so I was representing Christians, and we had a rabbi on the panel, and a imam from a mosque, and a couple other people. I can't remember who they were, but we were all talking about something, and I can't remember what the subject actually was, but I knew that we didn't have the same opinion of it. But yet, the first person said this, and the second one basically agreed with them, and then the third one said, we're basically all saying the same thing. We all kind of believe the same thing. And I was flabbergasted. And I was young. I was like, Malachi sitting next to me. I was the young guy in this group of people. I thought, this is ridiculous. Have you guys flushed your brains down the toilet? That's just not possible, because you're saying that we all believe the same things. In fact, it's not just not possible, it's disrespectful. You're actually disrespecting me if you say I believe the same thing you do, because it's just not reality. And I'm disrespecting you if I'm saying that what you believe is the same thing I believe. It's just not true. If we see an animal walk across the room, and it's an animal, hey, look at that dog, and then Malachi says, that's a nice cat, and this young lady says, I think that's a snake, well, it can't be all three, right? It's one of those three, or it's not. So either one of us is right, or all of us are wrong. There's just points of time when truth, you can't just say whatever you want to think is true. It just doesn't work out that way. But I think when it comes to this too, another part of that is when it sounds intolerant, it also sounds very unloving, right? Because doesn't it sound unloving to say, hey man, what you are believing and thinking is wrong, even if you're really passionate about it? It sounds far more loving to say, well, if that's what is meaningful to you, go for it. Live it out. Because that sounds loving, but it actually, I find that not to be true. No, I mean, is it really loving? And Malachi had talked quite a bit about this, and I thought he had some really good thoughts about, is this actually loving? when we tell somebody, hey man, your truth is your truth, go for it.
Yeah, you made a comment there that evangelical didn't used to be a bad word. And I'd like to unpack that a little bit just in what we're talking about here. I mean, I think as we think about this idea of telling somebody that what they believe and what they want to do is wrong, is unloving, let's think about the state of evangelicalism in America today, right? As Christians, we're seen by the media to be unloving, hateful people, right? And why is that exactly? I'm not going to make you answer that. But I think one of the main reasons is because, oh, you have an idea? Right. Yeah. Right. We don't accept who they are or what they do. It's kind of what we're labeled as, right? And the reality is that some of that's true. Right? We don't accept the way that people act. Well, I don't know that I would say accept, but we don't necessarily approve of sin, right? Because God doesn't approve of sin. And so we tell people that God tells people that their lives are wrong, that what they believe is wrong, and that their truth is not actually their truth. And so I think that can really be seen as something that's unloving and unkind. But in reality, as we think about Jesus, who says that I am the way, the truth, and the life, it is actually the most loving thing that we can do to tell somebody about Jesus as the way, the truth, and the life. To really love somebody is to let them know about Jesus as the way, the truth, and the life. And why is that true? Let's think about our own relationships with Jesus. Why is it loving to tell somebody about Jesus? I know that we sit in these sessions and we have people that talk to us about why we need to share our faith and its importance and the biblical background for that. But truly, like, why does it matter? Why should we even want to share our faith with people? Shouldn't we just let them be? Shouldn't we just let them live their own lives? Wouldn't that be the most caring and loving thing to do? Not if it means that they're going to hell, right? My teacher said one time that how much do you have to hate somebody to not share the gospel with them? I think these are powerful statements that we have to look at those around us, those people that we say that we love, and recognize and realize that their eternity is in the balance if they continue to follow their truth of what they believe to be true. Not just their eternity, but their lives even now in this life, right? All of us that love Jesus, that know Jesus, that walk with him every single day, why do we continue to do it every single day? Because it's a good life, right? Jesus says, I promise you life and life to the fullest. Each one of us, every single day, we could choose to turn around and walk away from Jesus and walk away from what he says. And yet we choose every day to follow after him. Because we believe that this life is the best life that there is to offer on this earth, that he created us, that he loves us, that he died for us. And so I think it's really, really important to understand that to love somebody, to obey the greatest commandment that Jesus gave, to love God and to love others, is to tell them about the one who came and died for them to save them now and for eternity.
I was thinking of this statement. And you guys should, if you're taking notes, this is one to write down, I think, is how do you say it? How much do you hate somebody to not tell them about Jesus? I mean, you said it differently.
Yeah, that's how I said it.
All right. I mean, that sounds harsh, right? Because it's probably not true that we actually hate somebody, and that's why we're not talking about Jesus. But I do think it's true is that it's like I'm not really caring about him, right? And so, I mean, I'm not disagreeing with you. I think it's an intense statement that makes us kind of like checks ourselves. Wow, I say I love this person. Do I really? Do I really love this person? If I'm not telling this person about Jesus, if I know Jesus, and I know he's the answer, he is the way, the truth, and the life, and I know that you doing you has its limitations, I know that my truth is my truth, your truth is your truth has its massive limitations, and I know that it comes down to this linchpin point of who Jesus is and how crucial he is for not just their life right now, but for all eternity. And I don't tell them about it. Why not? And I think that what happens is that it comes back to this you do you thing, whereas it's all about me. Right? I don't tell somebody because I'm usually afraid of how they're going to respond to me. And so my status with them might change. And so the reason I don't tell somebody about Jesus is because I'm more concerned about me than I am about them. About what's going to happen to me in that relationship. So it reminds me of when I came to Christ many, many years ago, previous century. I was in high school. I was on the wrestling team and had this guy on our team. His name was Adam. And this guy was always talking about Jesus. And we were like, man, this is crazy, Adam. Just talking about Jesus all the time. I mean, every time, not while we're wrestling, but in between things, he's talking about Jesus all the time. And we thought this guy was nuts. And I was in that camp of thinking this guy was nuts. And because he just was, and he wasn't like rude or anything, we just kept on talking about Jesus. And so everybody just kind of, when it came to Adam, when we actually would wrestle with Adam, we always were a little bit rougher with him in practice, even to the point that one day in practice, he was wrestling one of the coaches, and the coach, same thing, was going a little bit harder with Adam and broke Adam's leg in practice, that's actually not that easy to do in wrestling if you follow the rules. But so that happened, and it was pretty brutal. And so the next day, Adam shows up, his season's over, he's in a cast, and what is he doing? He's talking about Jesus. And so he was facing those massive consequences. We all thought he was an idiot. And he even faces that physical pain. But you know what? For me, it was like, oh my goodness, I had a good life, man. I was like, captain of the wrestling team. I can pat myself on the back. Had good grades, girlfriend. I had all the things, right? And then here this guy didn't have all that stuff, and yet he was talking about Jesus. And I thought, what do I have in my life that is worth going through what he's going through to talk about? And I said nothing. There was nothing that I was so committed to that I would go through what he was going through to talk about. And so finally, I just asked him. I gave him a ride home from practice. I said, Adam, I want to know God too. How do I do it? So he about fainted because he was so shocked. He had no idea that I was even paying attention to what he was saying. And so I came to Christ that day in the driveway of his house because he shared with me about the love of Jesus. And obviously radically changed the direction of my life from that point on. And so what was interesting, though, is in the ensuing weeks after that, I start to get to know some of these Adam's other friends who are followers of Jesus. And it turned out I knew quite a few of them, actually. And I had no idea that any of them were Christians. And I was thinking, wow, man, I probably was judgmental, but I was thinking, why didn't you tell me? This is so important, and you have known this, Jesus, but you didn't tell me. And maybe I was closed off, I don't know, but I just remember thinking that, of why not? And I can't go into their brains, I don't know why not, but I do think that's this whole thing about, this is where we talk about you do you breaks down. It massively breaks down. Or this my truth is my truth, your truth is your truth, because it's just not true. There is one who's the way, the truth, and life, and that's Jesus. And he gives us the opportunity to live for him, and he gives us the opportunity to actually share that with them. So that's true for all of us in our circles. My circle is obviously different than your circles. We all have our circles. And so, we should be loving others and to tell them about Jesus. That's letting, that you do you can get a whole better when you do yous in Jesus. Because who you are and what you do is all attached to the way, the truth, and the life. And that is a life that is way better and has eternal realities. So we're talking about our circles, but we are in Compass World Partners. So we are the missions arm, the cross-cultural overseas missions arm of the Charis Fellowship, missionaries. And so so we're going to turn this to, what does this mean? This your truth is your truth, my truth, you do you. What does that mean when it talks about the rest of the world? So very interesting that, again, unscripted a lot of this, but so Malachi, you just came back from somewhere doing something that relates to the world. So I'm curious as to what you did and why you did it.
Absolutely. Um, yeah, before we do that, can we take a moment and just stretch, wake up a little bit? Slap your neighbor if they're sleeping. Quick question, quick question. Whose favorite sermon was the one where he showed a GIF every 3 seconds? Raise your hand. Yeah, we were after we watched that one. We were like, man, we need like at least another 300 GIFs in our presentation here if anybody's going to pay attention. It was very distracting. All right, so we need a couple, at least a couple GIFs though to balance it out. Yeah, so this past summer, I spent 2 months in Central Asia, in a little country that you've never heard of. Actually, though, we had somebody yesterday that had heard of it, which was pretty impressive. It's called Kyrgyzstan. You have heard of it? Wow, impressive. We got some geography majors here. When I grew up a lot, probably like a lot of you, or maybe not. I don't know. How many of you are pastors' kids? Raise your hand. Okay, we got a couple PKs. Are you as rebellious as I was in high school? That's funny. Anyways, I grew up in a pastor's home, in a Christian home, very loving family. I'm the firstborn of 6 children. And I grew up going to, I know it's a lot of kids, right? I grew up going to Momentum and church 3-4 times a week, however many. Actually, I went to school at my church, so I was there literally every day of the week. Yeah, you do that too. And I love the Lord, but every time that I came to Momentum, it just felt different. It felt like I got to know God in a way that I never really got to know him the whole rest of the year. Camp is somewhat similar, but I loved my time at Momentum because I felt like I grew in my faith like leaps and bounds that just didn't exist outside of Momentum. But that was kind of the story of my life. The best week of summer was the week that I was closest to God at Momentum. And the rest of the year was one in which I was trying to bear this guilt of wanting to share my faith, but at the same time, I didn't want to share my faith. I wanted to make friends. I wanted to fit in. I wanted to be popular and date a pretty girl and be good at sports and all those sorts of things. And so that was kind of my focus in high school. I did end up becoming all of those things that I wanted to be. And yet I felt like I was living a double life, right? I'd show up to Momentum, and this was the group that I was with my youth group. And so we'd have fun, and we'd talk about Jesus, and we'd go to breakout sessions, and I would be one of the people that would answer all the questions because I knew all the answers as a pastor's kid. But the reality was I just got sick of this double life that I was living. And so I decided that I wanted to go to a Christian college instead of a public high school like I went to. And I got there, and I knew that the Lord was calling me to leave this lifestyle that I was living of sin and of pride and of myself and pursuing the things of the world. And it was either those things or it was him. And so the first step that meant was breaking up with my girlfriend of 2 years. And so my first weekend at school, that's actually what I did. And I remember walking back to my school, and I hit my hands and my knees on the sidewalk, and I just said, Lord, like, I am broken into a million different pieces right now. My heart is devastated. I feel like a puzzle piece that got thrown into a blender and then a lawnmower and then shot across the ocean. And I don't know how I'm going to pick back all these pieces up and put them together. But Lord, I know that I need you, and I know that my sin is so great before you. And I'm in desperate need of what your son Jesus did for me. And so it's that point that I really, really dedicated my life to the Lord, began to walk with him and watch him heal me every single day, and take care of me. And as we talked about this week and what does it mean to be known and to know God, I watched as I put my trust in him, my love for him began to grow. I began to ask myself, I need to tell people about this Jesus. If I really, really love this God, I need to obey his commands to go and to tell, but I just want to go because people need to know about him. I don't know how people live their whole lives without knowing about this Jesus. So I began to ask, okay, what does missions actually look like? And so I knocked on Encompass's door And I said, hey, I think I want to go overseas. I don't really know yet. Maybe I could go for like 3 weeks because I've never done that before. And they said, okay, we'll send you to a little place called Kyrgyzstan. And I was like, where? Never heard of that before. But so last year I went for 3 weeks, and the Lord just grew my heart for this place. And so I just spent the past 2 months there, living in a factory, working in the factory, and living with local people, learning Russian, and just learning what it means to be a part of the culture and to share this love about Jesus that I have with these people that I work with day in and day out, 12-hour days, and the people that I get to meet playing basketball and doing all sorts of different things. And so Ted actually served there for 12 years, right? 12 full years, which is about as old as some of you guys are, right? No, I'm kidding. So yeah, that was a little bit about my time. I was super blessed. I just got back like a week and a half ago, I guess. So I'm still a little fresh. My Russian is still there. So if any of you know Russian, you can come talk to me. You have a question? Yeah, I do. Oh, that's great. Yeah, I stayed with them. Yeah. Sai was my mentor for the summer. So that's cool.
And we knew Sai and Kyrgyzstan before he was married to Renessa. So he came and joined us over there. So Malachi just got back from Kyrgyzstan. Kudos, so why? But why go? I mean, he has his personal journey, right, of what God is doing in his own life, which is very cool. I've been very blessed to get to know him better and hear those things. But just why would you do that? Because life is hard enough as it is, right? But you guys face a lot of pressures where you're at. But I think part of that reality is that there's just incredible need in the world. So I'm trying to think of how to illustrate this. I don't actually know the stats of true Christians in the United States, but I'm going to just do an example. So I could have the first two rows stand up. Let's just say more or less this room represents the United States, and these first two rows represent true believers in Jesus. Might be a little bit less, might be a little bit more, I don't really know. But it's more or less going to be true, right? And so if you turn around and look back at the people behind you sitting down. So what you see a whole lot of people who don't know Jesus, right? And so there's a great need even here because of the fact that there is a lot of people around us who don't know the way, the truth, and the life. They don't know the Lord. And so that task that to truly love others means that you guys need to be taking that to those who don't know him. So I'm going to have everybody sit down in the front two except for you, young man, in the white shirt. And then you can sit down. Now let's go to many places of the world. This is the representation. This is the believer. And everyone else around them is not a believer. And so the reality is, and because it's not in one room, you have geographical spread, you have economic spread, you have ethnic spread, you have all kinds of things going on. This guy is not going to be able to reach the rest of the room. The believers that are in some of these places are not going to be able to reach the rest of the people for Jesus and let them know about the truth and the love of God on their own. So somebody has to do it. Okay, thank you. So so there's this incredible need in the world. And so I'll just give you one example. My wife and I, we spent 12 years in Kyrgyzstan, then we went to Thailand for 4 years. So the place that we lived was Khon Kaen, Thailand. Most of you probably haven't heard it because it's not the beautiful place. It's like the Kansas of Thailand. But the city and the region that we lived in had about 2 million people. All right, which I looked it up. And Metro Columbus, anybody here from Columbus area? Raise your hand. All right, quite a few of you. Thank you. So Metro Columbus has about 2 million as well. So it's actually more or less the same size. I talked to Mike, the former pastor at Polaris, and he told me that the people who would call Polaris their church is at least 1,500, right? That's just one church. That's just one of the Charis churches, which is one of just the many, many churches in Metro Atlanta. 1,500 people. If you went to the region of Khon Kaen, where we lived, if you gathered all the believers from all the churches together, you might have 500. So again, it'd be the same illustration of this when this young man stood up. And in that region, the same thing. Even though there are some churches that are some believers, the reality is it's not enough. There's just simply not enough people or churches to reach those who are in need of hearing. And so many people in the world are actually going to live their entire life without hearing the name of Jesus. And that, to me, if we talk about what is loving, we talk about loving others is to tell them the truth and get them out of the falsehood of your truth is your truth and my truth is my truth, and let them know the real truth. Well, that need is all around us, but it is especially acute and especially in need in many regions of the world. And that's why Encompass World Partners exists. And that's, so, part of our thought is of what does it mean? When you talk about you do you, I think what it really we're talking about is what does it mean to love? What does it mean to love others? And how does that affect us? And so that means sharing Jesus with them. And that means sharing Jesus in our circles. And it means sharing Jesus even globally and thinking about it. So most of you guys are in high school, can't do much about that right now, but you can do something. And that's going to be our application for today. And Malachi's going to explain what that is, and we'll be done.
Yeah, just give me 2 minutes here. I'll wrap up with something important. We bought plane tickets for everybody, and so we're all going to ship you off into that little country, Kyrgyzstan. No, I'm just kidding. But what I can do is ask you guys to do something so powerful, something that I guarantee is the reason why Ted and Kaylinn were on the field for 12 years and longer than that. Is I'm going to ask you to pray. So what we're going to do is, as you guys walk out, we're going to have you get handed a card with the name of a country that Encompass works in. Encompass specializes in working in the least reached peoples of the world. And so we're going to hand you a card of one of those least reached peoples of the world. Someday in heaven, we know that we will see every tribe, tongue, and nation worship the name of Jesus Christ. And so we're going to ask that you would pray for the missionaries that are there working in these countries. We're going to ask that you would pray for the church, that it would grow. We're going to ask that you would pray for your own heart, that God would stir in you a love for the world, because it's His heart for the world. It's His love for the world. And so more than just taking this piece of paper and shoving it in your backpack, which is literally what I do all the time, and then I will pull out crumpled up piece of paper in my backpack. I'm going to ask that you take a picture of it and set it as your lock screen, at least for like a week. Like, this is not something that's really hard. We get really easily bothered by our lock screens, and I know I change mine all the time. They have a feature now that you just tap and it changes, right? So can I just ask that you would set this as your lock screen? It's the first thing that we look at in the morning. It's the last thing that we look at when we go to bed, our phones. Can we just take some time to pray for these countries and think about the worldwide impact that we can have, and let alone the impact that God will work in our hearts? So we just want to say thank you for your time, and keep praying.
All right, thank you all.